The rain lashed Blackwood Manor while my family buried secrets. But the real storm began when I realized the $70 million missing wasn't a theft. It was a down payment for my father's orchestrated downfall. I didn't inherit an empire. I inherited a ticking clock rigged to explode the moment my sister, the secret architect of our ruin, decided to finally press send. The air in the study was thick, not with dust, but with the unspoken history of my family's immense, suffocating wealth. I traced the ornate carving on the mahogany desk, a desk my grandfather had supposedly used to sign away his soul, or at least a good chunk of our early fortune. Outside, the rain lashed against the Gothic windows of Blackwood Manor, mirroring the storm brewing inside me. I was supposed to be here celebrating my 30th birthday, the heir apparent, the golden boy. Instead, I was being audited by ghosts. "It's not about the money, Alex," Aunt Beatrice said, her voice a delicate, rusty blade. She never raised her voice. She didn't need to. Her very presence commanded silence. She sat perfectly upright in the high-backed leather chair, her posture impeccable even while delivering sentences that could crush lesser men. Beside her, Uncle Marcus nervously adjusted his silk tie, his eyes darting toward the massive, iron-bound safe tucked discreetly behind a revolving bookcase, the family vault. It wasn't just a safe. It was the repository of every dirty secret, every strategic silence, every piece of leverage our lineage had accumulated over 2 centuries. "Everything is about the money, Beatrice," I retorted, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. "And right now, the ledger doesn't balance. The Q3 reports show a missing $70 million. $70 million vanished from the overseas holding, and the paperwork leads directly to a shell corporation only you and Father had access to before he died." Aunt Beatrice offered a smile so thin it was almost invisible. "Your father was sentimental. He always preferred complicated solutions to simple transactions. We protected the family name, Alex. That's what matters." That was their code. Protected the family name meant they had buried something so toxic that if it ever surfaced, the ensuing scandal would make the tabloids look like children's bedtime stories. My father had died 6 months ago, suddenly, leaving me this crumbling estate, this suffocating legacy, and a mountain of paperwork that screamed cover-up. Protecting it from what exactly, I pushed, leaning forward. I found documents, coded financial transfers dating back 5 years, funneling money to a holding account in the Cayman Islands. The recipient's signature is coded, but the date sequence matches the public relations crisis from when the pharmaceutical venture almost went under. Uncle Marcus finally spoke, his voice strained. "That was a necessary precaution, strategic investment against potential lawsuits. You wouldn't understand the pressures of managing this scale of enterprise, Alex. You've been busy backpacking through Asia, finding yourself." The condescension stung, but I swallowed it down. I knew they thought I was weak, the artistic dreamer who happened to inherit the keys to the kingdom. They were wrong. While I was backpacking, I was also learning how to disappear, how to observe, and most importantly, how to pick the locks that society, and my own relatives, put on the truth. I understand that $70 million isn't strategic investment when the money trail ends with an intermediary known for funding, let's call them politically disruptive entities, I said, watching their faces carefully. Beatrice's composure cracked just for a millisecond. "That is slanderous speculation," she hissed, her voice losing its silken quality. "Is it? Because I didn't just find the transfers, Aunt. I found the notes your secretary made. Notes about the arrangement. Notes mentioning the sealed deposition from the '08 environmental disaster case, the one where the official report conveniently vanished the day before the jury was seated." Silence descended again, heavier than before. The grandfather clock in the hall chimed the quarter hour, each tick sounding like a gavel blow. They had been relying on my ignorance, on my deference to the old guard. They hadn't anticipated that in my quest for self-discovery, I'd stumbled into the murky underbelly of my own inheritance. "You are overreaching, Alex," Marcus warned, his hand tightening into a fist on the armrest. "This house, this company, it all belongs to the trust, which we oversee. There are rules. Rules that allowed you to siphon off funds to suppress evidence of gross negligence? Rules that let you bribe officials?" I scoffed. "I'm not interested in your outdated rule book. I want to know what the arrangement entails, and I want the full accounting of where that $70 million went. If I don't get it by morning, I take everything I found, the transfer logs, the secretary's notes, the matching dates, straight to the authorities. Not for tax evasion, Beatrice, for something much, much worse. Something that could lead to serious jail time for anyone involved in suppressing a criminal cover-up." Aunt Beatrice finally stood up. She moved with lethal grace, stopping directly opposite me. The shadows from the rain-streaked windows played across her face, making her look ancient and terrifying. "You think you can threaten us? You think a few dusty papers can bring down generations of careful maneuvering?" She leaned in, her breath smelling faintly of expensive, bitter coffee. "Alex, you are playing a very dangerous game. The people involved in the arrangement are not the sort who appreciate familial disputes spilling into the public domain. They are sophisticated, and they are ruthless. They have absolutely no regard for sentimentality, and certainly not for the sanctity of bloodlines." "Then tell me what I'm dealing with," I challenged, my own heart hammering against my ribs. "Give me the details, and maybe we can find a clean way out. Maybe." Beatrice's smile returned, colder this time, victorious. She knew she had me cornered, not by threat, but by leverage. She stepped back toward the bookcase, her fingers brushing the leather-bound volumes of Dante. "We can discuss a clean way out, yes. But first, you need to understand the cost of silence. That $70 million? It wasn't an investment for us, Alex. It was the initial down payment for a very specific kind of protection. A protection that ensures certain dangerous individuals stay quiet about a decade-old incident involving your father, a construction site accident, and a pile of falsified safety reports." She spun the bookcase exactly 3 degrees clockwise, and with a soft mechanical whir, the section of wall swung inward, revealing the massive, formidable outline of the family vault. The heavy steel door gleamed dully under the dim light of the study. "You want to know what you are dealing with? You want the full accounting? It's all in there," she declared, tapping a long manicured nail against the cold steel. "But getting to it is not as simple as presenting a set of demands. The vault is keyed to 3 specific biometric signatures, and my father made sure that only one person besides himself and myself knew the full override sequence. That person holds the true power now, and they have already made their terms known to us. Your ultimatum, Alex, is irrelevant. The price for silence has already been negotiated, and the key to the entire operation, the key to keeping you out of prison alongside us for complicity, is currently being held by the person who orchestrated your father's downfall." The reveal hit me like a physical blow. My father's downfall? I thought he was the architect of this entire edifice of deceit, not its victim. "What are you talking about, Beatrice? My father built this empire. Who could possibly orchestrate anything against him?" I demanded, taking a step toward the vault, the metal looking less like a storage unit and more like a coffin lid. Uncle Marcus finally regained a semblance of control, straightening his already immaculate suit. "It was an internal struggle, Alex, a power play disguised as everything that's happened recently. Your father had become too erratic, too concerned with appearances. He wanted to confess certain aspects of the 08 situation, said it was weighing on his conscience. Beatrice and I disagreed. We had to secure the assets and the silence before he destroyed everything." "You're lying," I whispered, staring at Beatrice. Her eyes, usually so guarded, held a flicker of genuine fear now, not just the performance of authority. If you were securing the assets, why is the money gone now? Why are you telling me this only after I cornered you with evidence? Because the money is the leverage, Beatrice stated, her voice dropping back to that dangerous, confidential tone. The $70 million was paid to secure the silence of the one individual who possesses the third biometric key and the full override code for the vault. This person threatened to expose the entire history, the payoffs, the compromised officials, everything, unless they received that significant sum. We paid it because the alternative was far more catastrophic. "Who is it?" I pressed, ignoring Marcus's frantic hand signals to lower my voice. The rain outside seemed to have stopped, leaving an oppressive, waiting quiet in the room. Beatrice glanced at the vault, a deep vein of resentment visible around her mouth. "It's Elias Thorne." The name didn't immediately register in the context of our family's quiet criminality. Elias Thorne. The name belonged in the society pages, associated with avant-garde architecture and philanthropic galas. He was the man who had been quietly dating my older sister Clara for the last year, a relationship my father had tolerated but never approved of. "Thorne? He's an architect. He designs skyscrapers, not organized schemes," I scoffed. But a cold knot formed in my stomach. Clara had been acting distant lately, canceling plans, her calls always short. "He was an architect," Beatrice corrected, her eyes sharp. "He's much more than that now. Elias is the son of Robert Thorne, the lead engineer who died in that construction site disaster back in 2008. Your father made sure Robert Thorne took all the blame for the structural failure, signed documents that ruined the family's reputation, and essentially erased them from the high society blueprints. Robert Thorne committed suicide a year later." The pieces clicked into place with horrifying speed. Elias wasn't just Clara's boyfriend. He was an avenging angel, weaving himself into the heart of the family he intended to dismantle. He hadn't just been dating Clara, he had been collecting access. "He's been feeding you information," Marcus muttered, looking utterly defeated. "He gained Clara's trust, befriended your father in the last months, charmed his way into the inner circle, all while gathering the evidence he needed. And now he has the money, and he has the key to the vault," I realized, my mind racing through the implications. If the vault contained the documents proving my father's involvement in manslaughter or fraud, Elias Thorne now held the key to releasing them, or selling them back to us at an astronomical rate. "Worse," Beatrice interjected, her voice laced with venom. "He didn't just get the money, he demanded something else, something far more valuable than the $70 million. He demanded Clara." I stared at her, speechless. Demanded her? What does that even mean? Marriage? A ransom? "It means he controls the narrative, Alex. He has the evidence that sends us away for decades, perhaps even results in an accusation of ciężkie obwinienie against the entire board for suppression of evidence. He told us that if we breathe a word of this to anyone, especially you, or if we try to retrieve the vault contents without his consent, he releases everything, including details about the shady deals your father made with certain less savory international contacts. He also made it explicitly clear he won't release the override sequence until Clara agrees to leave this life behind and move with him, permanently, under his control. He essentially leveraged our freedom against our niece's autonomy. My sister Clara, the gentle, artistic soul who always sought refuge in her sketchbooks. Now she was the linchpin in a decades-long revenge plot, trapped between the man who claimed to love her and the family whose sins had forged the chains around her neck. "Where is she now?" I asked, the veneer of composure finally shattering. "She thought she was going on a short romantic trip with Elias to the Aegean," Marcus whispered, finally looking up at me, his eyes pleading. "He took her phone 2 days ago. He told us through his lawyers that if any official inquiries are made, if any mention of Elias Thorne, Robert Thorne, or the 08 disaster surfaces anywhere, he will immediately publish the entirety of the evidence he has compiled, and Clara will be the first person implicated as an accomplice to obstruction. Implicated how? Beatrice stepped back towards the safe, a desperate glint in her eye. He told us that the only way for us to ever see Clara again, or the vault contents, is to prove we are willing to play by his rules. He sent a single communication this morning, timed precisely for the moment you were due to arrive here for your birthday luncheon. She pulled a thick, cream-colored envelope from a hidden compartment inside the safe door, a compartment clearly designed for quick access, a contingency plan I never knew existed. She didn't open it, she just held it out to me. This contains the final instructions. Elias Thorne hasn't just blackmailed us, Alex. He has issued a challenge. He wants us to retrieve something from the vault, something that predates the 08 incident, something so valuable to the Thorne family that it serves as the final piece of his retribution, and deliver it to him by sunrise tomorrow. If we fail, or if we try to involve the Service of Internal Security, he releases the data and Clara disappears into a life where she is legally and financially tied to him forever, with no way out. I took the heavy envelope. The wax seal bore the unmistakable stylized crest of Elias Thorne. And if I go into that vault right now, what happens? I asked, my hand hovering over the locking mechanism. Beatrice gave a dry, rattling sigh. If you attempt to access the vault without Thorne's authorization code, the secondary failsafe engages. It's not designed to lock you out, Alex. It's designed to destroy the contents. The entire center chamber is rigged with corrosive agents that will render every document, every ledger, every piece of incriminating evidence inside utterly useless. A pile of sludge. And the trigger for that failsafe? She paused, her eyes locking onto mine, the fear absolute. The trigger is tied directly to the proximity alarm on Clara's missing phone. If she moves outside a designated radius, or if her phone is powered down for more than 12 hours, the vault dissolves. We lose the leverage against the government records. We lose the evidence against the radical financing network your father was involved with. And Clara will be lost to us forever, effectively imprisoned by his control. My knuckles were white against the thick paper of Thorne's decree. The corrosive agent contingency was a masterstroke of desperate defense, placed there by my father years ago as a scorched earth policy against any hostile takeover. It meant the information we needed to secure our own safety. The proof that Beatrice and Marcus acted under duress would be instantly vaporized if Clara's location signal dropped. So, we have a ticking clock based on my sister's mobile phone and a demand for a specific item from the vault, which we can only access with Thorne's permission code, I summarized, forcing logic back into the chaos. And if we try to contact any external legal help, the entire situation escalates, potentially leading to charges of tяжкое обвинение against my father's estate, and Clara is permanently trapped. Marcus nodded miserably. He knows exactly how precarious our position is. He has every vulnerability cataloged. And what is this item he demands we retrieve? I asked, turning the heavy envelope over in my hands. The wax felt warm, as if charged with latent energy. Beatrice carefully lifted a small antique silver key from the same hidden compartment she'd revealed earlier. It was delicate, almost ornamental, completely unlike the industrial mechanism of the main vault lock. This key, she said, her voice barely a rasp, opens a small internal compartment inside the main vault structure. It contains the Thorne retribution file. Your father kept it separate because he was terrified of it falling into Elias Thorne's hands. It contains the original, unredacted confession signed by Robert Thorne before his death, detailing how your father manipulated the safety inspections. but also detailing several highly illegal, off-the-books arms deals your father funded in the late 90s to finance the initial growth of the company. My blood ran cold. Arms deals? That explained why Beatrice mentioned less savory international contacts. The stakes just went from corporate fraud to potentially aiding and abetting organizations that dealt in actual violence. This wasn't just about money. It was about treasonous activity layered atop negligence. If Elias gets that confession, he doesn't just get revenge on my father's memory. He gets the power to destroy the entire global network built on those deals, I realized. He gains leverage over those international partners, leverage that could put him in unimaginable danger or make him untouchable. Precisely. He wants the proof that can either crush us or make him the most powerful, dangerous man in the city, Marcus confirmed. And he wants us to hand it to him willingly, to participate in our own downfall. I slit the envelope open with my thumbnail. Inside, there was only a single laminated photograph and a small folded note. The photograph was recent, taken perhaps within the last week. It showed Clara. She was sitting at a simple wooden table in what looked like a sun-drenched, sparsely furnished room, definitely not a luxury resort. She was sketching intently, but her expression was strained, focused not on the paper, but on something just beyond the frame. The note was handwritten, elegant, Thorne's distinctive cursive unmistakable. Alex, your family's greed has cost me everything. Now you pay the toll. Sunrise tomorrow. Inside the vault, behind the third shelf on the left, there is a small mahogany box marked RT. Deliver that box to the designated drop point, coordinates attached, by 6 o'clock sharp. If you use any official channel, if you breathe a word of this to any service of internal security, or if you fail to retrieve the box, Clara's phone will be deactivated and the vault will dissolve. Choose wisely. Your family legacy ends here, one way or another. Beneath the signature were GPS coordinates, shockingly specific, pointing to an abandoned pier down by the old industrial docks, a notorious dead zone, perfect for a clandestine exchange. He's forcing us to choose between self-preservation, by handing over the evidence that exposes our darkest secrets, and our sister's immediate safety, I muttered, tracing the coordinates on a piece of stationery. Beatrice leaned over my shoulder, her breath hot on my neck. We cannot use the official channels. We cannot risk the vault dissolving, Alex. If that failsafe triggers, we're exposed to charges of tяжкое обвинение for covering up the deaths on that construction site, regardless of Thorne's other files. We have to play his game. But if we give him that file, he owns us forever, I countered. He secures himself against those international contacts, and he still holds Clara as a form of collateral until he decides he's done using us. I looked back at the silver key. It was small enough to lose in the palm of my hand, yet it held the potential to unleash a far greater level of chaos than the general corporate espionage. There has to be another way to track Clara without disabling her phone, I insisted, pacing the length of the desk. If we can find her location independently, we might be able to secure her before sunrise, giving us time to confront Thorne without detonating the vault. Marcus, looking defeated, pointed toward the desk. His lawyer sent over one final attachment with the note, a small electronic device. He said it's a token of good faith. It's keyed to Clara's phone. If we attach it to the exterior casing of the vault, it monitors her signal. If the phone loses power or moves too far from the area where he's holding her, the token flashes red and the vault countdown timer begins. But it's designed only to warn us, not to override the safety. He gestured toward a small, sleek black device resting on the blotter. It looked like a high-end tracking beacon. It's a trap, Marcus. If we attach it, we are officially acknowledging his terms, I said. But the lure of knowing Clara's status was too strong. I picked up the tracker. It was cold to the touch. "We need time, Alex. We have to secure the Thorn retribution file, deliver it, and then use the information gleaned from that exchange to find Clara's precise location before the 12-hour window closes," Beatrice urged, her desperation mounting. "If we retrieve the file and hide it, Thorn releases everything immediately. We have to trust his instructions for now." I looked at the vault door, then at the silver key. The only path forward seemed to be deeper into the conspiracy. I inserted the silver key into the small, intricate lock on the main safe door. It turned with a soft, agonizing click. The inner mechanism of the massive lock began to rotate, a series of internal bolts groaning as they disengaged. "Stay here," I commanded Beatrice and Marcus. "If anything happens, if I'm not back in 10 minutes, or if you hear any external alarms, contact the lawyer and tell him we accept his terms, no matter what." I braced myself, gripping the heavy steel handle. I pulled the door open just enough to slip inside the dark cavity. The air that rushed out was stale and metallic, smelling faintly of old paper and ozone. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, illuminating rows of steel shelving filled with leather-bound ledgers and heavy lockboxes. I located the area Beatrice described, the third shelf, left side. There, nestled among dull, official documents, sat a small, highly polished mahogany box, perhaps 8 inches long, devoid of any markings save for a faint, almost invisible etching of a stylized raven in flight on the lid. As I reached for the box, my foot brushed against something loose on the metal floor of the vault. I aimed my light down and saw it, a small, dark object half hidden beneath a sheaf of old prospectuses. It was a piece of electronic hardware, clearly not part of the vault's original construction. It looked like a highly sophisticated, military-grade data chip, blinking with a faint, intermittent blue light. I picked it up. Before I could even analyze what it was, a sharp, synthesized voice suddenly cut through the oppressive silence of the vault, amplified unnervingly through an unseen speaker system. "Unauthorized access detected. Manual override sequence initiated. Secondary defense protocol commencing in T-minus 60 seconds. The synthesized voice, cold and impersonal, echoed in the confined space, bouncing off the steel walls of the vault. 60 seconds. My heart leaped into my throat. I was trapped inside the very mechanism designed to destroy the evidence, and the external safety mechanism, Clara's phone, was somehow triggering the internal failsafe regardless of Thorn's explicit instructions. I snatched the mahogany box, shoving it deep into the inner pocket of my jacket, and whirled around, aiming my flashlight at the floor where I'd found the strange data chip. The blinking blue light was still there, insistent and alarming. It was attached to a thin wire that snaked out from under a stack of documents toward the back wall of the vault. This was not part of the original failsafe. This was new. This was Thorn's real trap. I scrambled out of the vault, slamming the heavy door shut with all my weight, my muscles screaming in protest. I yanked the silver key from the lock, but it was too late. The heavy bolts were already locking back into place, driven by an electronic command that overrode the manual key's release. "Beatrice! Marcus! Get back!" I roared, sprinting toward the bookcase. Beatrice and Marcus, who had been standing by the desk, stared at the vault in horror. "What happened? We didn't touch anything," Marcus stammered. "There's an external trigger. Something is activating the corrosive agent," I yelled, pointing frantically at the black tracking beacon Marcus had placed on the desk earlier. It was flashing a violent, pulsing red, the alarm signal for Clara's missing phone. "But we haven't heard anything from Clara," Beatrice cried, rushing to the tracker. I ignored them, my mind focused solely on the blinking blue chip in my hand. If the vault dissolved, we lost everything, and Clara was still in danger. I had to disarm this second trigger. "The chip I found, it's wired into the internal locking mechanism." I held up the small piece of hardware. "Thorn must have planted this during his relationship with Clara. It's overriding the physical lock and preparing to trigger the dispersal system when the phone goes dead or moves out of range." A harsh grinding sound emanated from behind the bookcase. The steel was beginning to vibrate ominously. The corrosive agents, whatever they were activating. I had seconds. "The tracker, Marcus! Smash the tracker!" I commanded, knowing the external alarm was signaling the internal shutdown. Marcus didn't hesitate this time. He grabbed the heavy brass letter opener from the desk and brought it down with crushing force onto the small black device. It cracked open, sparks briefly sputtering before it went dark. The grinding from the vault stopped abruptly. Silence returned, deafening and total. We stood frozen, staring at the bookcase. Did it work? Did we stop the destruction? Slowly, cautiously, Beatrice reached out and nudged the edge of the revolving bookcase. It didn't budge. "It's jammed," she whispered, her voice trembling. "The mechanism is locked, Alex. The system must have been phased. The external alarm triggered the internal lockdown, and now the internal failsafe has locked the entire outer door against manual override." I rushed forward, throwing my shoulder against the heavy wood. Nothing. The entire assembly was sealed shut. We were locked out of the family's deepest secrets, secrets that were likely dissolving into toxic sludge mere inches away. "The silver key!" I exclaimed, pulling the delicate key from my pocket. "Maybe this unlocks the outer mechanism?" I jammed the silver key into a tiny, almost invisible keyhole near the edge of the bookcase where it met the wall paneling. I twisted. It clicked, but instead of opening the lock, a tiny speaker hidden near the base of the shelf crackled to life. It wasn't the synthesized voice this time. It was Elias Thorne's voice, smooth, amused, and very close. "Did you really think I would rely on a simple proximity alarm, Alex? That was merely the appetizer. If you're hearing this, it means the initial failsafe has been successfully triggered and halted. Impressive deduction skills, heir apparent. But now you've proven you can get into the safe. A problem for another time." He paused, and I could almost visualize the smug smile on his face. The mahogany box. That was the true test. I need it by sunrise, delivered to the coordinates I provided. If you choose to stay here trying to pick the lock on my secondary system, I assure you the corrosion won't destroy the documents entirely. It will merely render them unreadable, except for the one piece you absolutely need to survive, Robert Thorne's original confession. That will remain perfectly intact, printed on specialized paper that resists acid. A wave of cold dread washed over me. He hadn't just wanted the box to destroy his enemy's leverage. He wanted to force us to choose which disaster we preferred. If we handed over the box containing the evidence of arms dealing, we might save Clara and avoid the complete corporate collapse. But Thorne would still hold the confession that condemned my father for manslaughter. "However," Thorne continued, his voice turning serious, "I have one final courtesy for my darling Clara's birthday. I've decided to ease your time constraints slightly. I'm sending you one final piece of data, a live feed, so you can see exactly what your sister is up to and confirm that she is unharmed. This should give you the impetus you need to meet my deadline." The lights in the study flickered violently, then stabilized, but the massive flat-screen television mounted above the fireplace flared to life, displaying a high-definition video feed. It wasn't a sparsely furnished room. It was a massive, sterile-looking control center, filled with banks of monitors displaying complex logistical data, shipping manifests, security camera feeds, and satellite tracking overlays. And there, at the center console, illuminated by the cold blue light of the screens, was Clara. She wasn't sketching. She was wearing tactical gear, her expression grim and utterly focused. She wasn't a prisoner. She was operating the machinery. And controlling the screen directly above her head was a pulsing digital timer counting down from 4 hours and 52 minutes. Then the camera zoomed in, focusing sharply on a single element Clara was manipulating on a touchscreen interface, a secure communications channel, which she was actively opening, her fingers flying across the glass as she prepared to send a massive data packet labeled Final Release. "You see, Alex?" Thorne's voice concluded smoothly from the speaker, laced with chilling triumph. "Clara is not being held hostage. She is the one issuing the ultimatum. And if you don't bring me the box, she releases everything. Your father's corruption, the arms deals, and the evidence of Beatrice and Marcus's cover-up to every major regulatory body and news outlet simultaneously. You have less than 5 hours to comply, or she burns the world down." The sight of Clara, not captive but commanding the digital siege, ripped through my manufactured calm. She wasn't just Thorne's pawn. She was his most devastating weapon, a wolf in sheep's clothing who had played the role of the sheltered niece perfectly. My father hadn't just been undone by a vengeful architect. He'd been undone by his own daughter, weaponized by the man whose father she had allowed to die. "She's working with him," I breathed, turning to Beatrice and Marcus, who were staring at the screen, their faces pale masks of shock and disbelief. "She isn't his prisoner. She's his partner. The phone alarm wasn't her signal being lost. It was her activating the data dump." The digital clock glowed menacingly. 4:51:03. "But why?" Marcus choked out. "She was so close to him. She loved him." "Love is a potent tool for manipulation," Beatrice managed, finally regaining a shred of her sharp intellect, though her hands shook visibly. If she wanted revenge for her grandfather, she needed proof that could destroy us completely. Proof that was secured inside that vault. Thorne needed the leverage, the confession, to force our hand while she prepared the final release. The paradox was staggering. We were trapped between two ticking bombs, the vault dissolving if we delayed retrieving the file, or the entire family empire and my father's legacy being exposed globally if we didn't deliver the file to Thorne before Clara hit send. "There is no winning move here, is there?" I said, my voice dangerously level. "If we give him the file, we save Clara's digital bomb, but remain exposed to the confession. If we don't, the whole house of cards collapses, and Clara ensures every secret is public." I looked at the sealed door of the vault, then down at the strange, blinking blue chip I still held. It was the key to the internal trap, the mechanism that forced the choice. "The blue chip," I announced, grabbing a heavy crystal paperweight. "If Clara's phone signal is the trigger for the dissolution of the vault, then that chip must be the trigger for the release of the data, or perhaps the mechanism that allows her to send the full packet. Thorne planted it. He's layered the traps." Beatrice looked at the chip with dawning horror. "If you destroy that chip, Alex, you might disable her upload sequence. But if you're wrong, and it's wired to protect the confession inside the vault, if I don't destroy it, Clara sends everything at 6 o'clock, and we lose any chance of negotiating, even with the leverage Thorne thinks he has," I countered. "Clara's primary goal now is total systemic destruction. Thorne's goal is acquiring that specific document." I realized the fundamental flaw in Thorne's plan. He trusted Clara implicitly, and he underestimated my desperation to save my sister, even from herself. He thought she was his willing executioner. I had to gamble she was just following orders that she believed were necessary for justice. I placed the small blue chip against the edge of the marble desktop. I raised the heavy paperweight high above my head. "Beatrice, Marcus, listen carefully. If I destroy this, Clara's upload stops. If it stops, we have a window, a very small window, to retrieve the retribution file, deliver it to Thorne, and try to use the existence of the file as collateral to secure Clara's release without her wiping everything clean." I didn't wait for their consent. With a guttural cry of pure adrenaline, I brought the paperweight down with crushing force onto the blue chip. There was a tiny, sharp snap, followed by a high-pitched electronic whine, that cut off instantly. On the television screen, Clara froze. Her fingers hovered over the send button. The 4-hour countdown clock halted, freezing at 4:48:12. On the screen, Clara looked up, not at the console, but directly at the camera lens, directly at me. Her face was a mixture of fury and dawning realization. She slammed her hand down on the console, not on the send button, but on a different console that initiated a hard reboot sequence for her entire system. "He's buying time," I shouted. "We have maybe 10 minutes before her system comes back online, and she restarts the upload." I turned back to the sealed vault. Now the focus shifted entirely to the mahogany box. We had to retrieve it and deliver it. "The silver key," Beatrice gasped, pointing to the tiny lock on the bookcase panel. "The chip was the external trigger. The silver key must be the override to stop the internal locking mechanism before the corrosive agents finish their work." I jammed the key back in and twisted again, applying every ounce of my weight. This time, instead of the faint speaker, I heard a heavy thunk from deep within the wall structure. The entire bookcase shuddered violently, and then, with a sound like a giant exhaling, the whole unit swung inward, exposing the gaping black maw of the vault once more. The air that billowed out was acrid, stinging the eyes, confirming that the corrosive agents had been active. But the grinding had stopped. I plunged back inside, ignoring the burning sensation on my skin. The shelves were slick with residue, but the mahogany box, the Thorn Retribution file, was still there, miraculously untouched. I grabbed it, tucking it securely inside my jacket over the faint impression of the blue chip I had just destroyed. I emerged, slamming the vault shut, not bothering with the silver key. "Marcus, you have the coordinates. Get the car ready, now. Beatrice, contact Thorn's lawyer. Tell him we have the file, but our deal has changed. We deliver the file, but Clara is to be released unharmed and uncompromised before the transfer happens." We moved with synchronized urgency that only shared mortal terror can induce. Marcus was already halfway to the garage. Beatrice was on the secure line, her voice firming up as she tasted the possibility of victory. "If Clara is working against us, we leverage the file against Thorn to save her, not to save the family name," I stated, meeting Beatrice's eyes. "The old way of doing things is dead. We use this evidence to protect Clara, and then we use what's left of the company's resources to walk away from every illegal connection, every compromised official. We survive, but we dismantle the machine that created this mess." As we raced toward the docks, the battered sedan flying through the pre-dawn mist, I pulled out the coordinates. 4 hours was now less than 1. As the sun finally crested the horizon, painting the grimy industrial water an ugly orange, we arrived at the deserted pier. Thorn was there, standing alone at the edge of the rotting wood, looking surprisingly ordinary in a plain trench coat. Beside him stood Clara. She was looking out at the water, her tactical vest gone, replaced by a simple wool sweater. She looked exhausted, haunted, but free. I stepped out of the car, keeping my hands visible. "The file," I called out. "Where is the guarantee that you release everything on Clara and walk away?" Thorn smiled, a genuine, relieved smile that looked alien on his face. He nodded toward Clara. "She proved her loyalty. She stopped the upload. She wants out, Alex. She wants the peace that comes from finally settling the score." He held up his phone, showing a clean screen, no pending uploads. "The exchange is simple. You hand me the box, I walk away with my grandfather's true account, and Clara walks away free, with no lingering legal ties to me or this operation." I took the mahogany box out. It felt heavy with finality. I walked halfway across the pier, stopping exactly where the coordinates dictated. "You release her first," I insisted. Clara turned from the water, her eyes meeting mine across the expanse of broken wood. She didn't look vengeful. She looked like someone who had just finished a long, necessary battle. "It's done, Alex," she said, her voice steady. "Go. Give him the box. The only thing left for me to fight for is a clean slate, and he can't have that if he keeps me tethered." I tossed the box. It landed with a soft thud near Thorne's feet. He bent down, picked it up, and ran a finger reverently over the raven etching. He looked up at me, then at Clara, a look of victory washing over him. "Thank you, Alex," he said, his tone almost cordial. He gave Clara a gentle nod, and she started walking toward me, crossing the broken planks. As Clara reached my side, Thorne turned, tucking the box securely inside his coat. He paused, looking back at the now empty space where the vault's contingency plan had been. "One last thing, Alex," Thorne called out, his voice regaining its sharp edge. "When you retrieved that blue chip from the vault, you stopped the immediate data dump. Very smart. But you forget that you were holding the only physical link to the hard drive I've been using to collate all this evidence. It's a remote access device. I didn't need Clara to press send on that console. I needed you to bring the final piece of the puzzle to me, here, where I can safely wipe the master drive and secure my own freedom." He held up his own phone, displaying a status bar that rapidly cycled through processing to 100% complete. "The evidence is gone, Alex. All of it. The confession, the arms deals, the suppression files, everything you hoped to use for leverage against Beatrice and Marcus, everything I needed to secure my own safety. It's all erased from the cloud. You saved your sister's immediate freedom, but you destroyed the only leverage we had left to protect the family from the lesser charges. You chose the person over the power." Thorne gave a curt nod, turned, and walked briskly away, disappearing into the morning fog with Clara's former partner, leaving me standing on the pier with my sister, the sun fully risen, the shadows of the past finally dispersed, but the future suddenly terrifyingly uncertain. We were free of Elias Thorne, but we were also free of proof. The cost of silence had been paid, not in money, but in total systemic disarmament. The real battle, the cleanup, was about to begin.